what do you do when technology is advancing so fast? You want to create success, but really, we're at a point where AI is coming in and taking over jobs left and right. What do you do to secure the things that you're doing? If you want to create success when there's so much advancements, what are the tools that you need in order to be able to create that? And it really comes down to just one simple thing that you already have. And that comes down to your imagination. So, as we go through this book, The Laws of Success, and define what does success look like. Again, this book is 100 years old. And so what do we do when we bring it up to today's speed? What are the laws of success that you need in 2025 to be able to create that success moving forward? And so this all comes down, I wanted to read, it all comes down to your ability to create in your imagination. It always starts in your imagination. So let's define what is imagination according to Napoleon Hill. So he said, imagination is too often regarded merely as an indefinite, untrackable, and indescribable something that does nothing but create fiction. And so when we look at what is your imagination is your ability to think outside of the box, your ability to look at what information do I have and what can I create? If you want to stay ahead of the game, if you want to be able to stay ahead of technology, it doesn't mean you have to be smarter than AI, but what it does mean is that you need the ability to think creatively, to use your imagination to take old ideas and turn them into something new. So, I want to go through and tell you a few stories of people who've done this because when we talk about creation, when we talk about imagination, there are going to be people who say, "Oh, I'm way more analytical and I don't create that way." And I want to challenge that thinking because everyone has the ability to create. In fact, it is the only thing that can never be taken from you, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of what you are faced with, whether that is financial struggles or emotional struggles, whatever is coming at you, you have the ability to create something new. It's the only thing in the world that you have absolute control over. This ability to creatively think, to use your imagination to create something new. And so let's look at what that looked like in the past. You hopefully have heard the story of Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was in a concentration camp during World War II, and he was in the most dire circumstances. Literally everything was stripped from him, even down to his wedding ring. He knew that, so when he got there on the train, him and his wife separated. They went in different ways. And he later found out that his wife was taken straight to the gas chamber and she did not make it. And he knew that if he kept his wedding ring, that would be a cause for someone to come after him because he had something. And so he took that wedding ring off and he threw it out because he didn't want any reason for them to take more away from him. It was better for him to choose to get rid of it than to have things stripped away from him. But he lacked enough food and nutrition. He lacked the sleep because they worked him so much. And he was in the most dire circumstances. But because he was a psychologist and he understood the human mind and what he needed, he said that he could come down to the very moment that someone was going to not make it through the concentration camp. And it came down because they lost hope. If you have all of your physical things stripped and taken away, not enough food, not enough shelter, not enough clothing, all of those things can be taken away. But Viktor Frankl proved to us that if you can maintain your mind, have something to hope for. So Viktor Frankl's hope was to write a book. And the first few months that he was in the concentration camp, he had a script that he had been working on. And that ended up being taken from him and destroyed. And so the thing that helped him keep moving forward, despite losing his family, despite losing everything around him, all of his physical circumstances were in complete dire needs. But he had hope because he knew the power that came from maintaining your mind. And so he wrote and rewrote this book over and over, day after day, when he was in this concentration camp. And it wasn't until the war was over and he was released that he was able to actually write this book. And it changed people's lives because of the power of hope. That is the use of imagination. Thinking about what are your circumstances and what are the things that we're taking these old, outdated things that we surround ourselves with all the time and creating something new. And for Viktor Frankl, that came in the form of a book. Now, the next one we want to talk about is Nelson Mandela. Now, Nelson Mandela was imprisoned because he was standing up against people who were trying to oppress the nation of South Africa. And he spent several months in jail. Again, didn't have enough food, didn't have appropriate shelter and things like that for him. And he was in a space, and he said the only thing that allowed him to get through that experience was that he exercised and studied every single day. What were the things that he studied? He believed so strongly about his political philosophies that he studied out those things. And it was those months in jail when he had all of the physical comforts stripped away from him, that all of the outside things were saying, give up. You don't have hope. There's no reason for you to continue moving forward. He maintained that creativity in his mind, and he was able to create something so that when he was released, he ended up doing so much good for the country of South Africa because he was able to maintain his mind and to exercise the things that were happening on the inside. Creativity starts on the inside. Okay. I want to go through just two more stories. Next is Luis Zamperini. He was an American who went and fought in World War II. He was flying a bomber plane, and his plane got hit, and he ended up with him and a buddy. He ended up in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and they were adrift in the middle of the ocean for 47 days, only to be picked up by a Japanese ship that took them to a prisoner of war camp. Here, he was tortured. He was treated extremely harsh because of the conditions that he was in. And he went through, and when his plane went down, there was a telegram sent to his family that he had died. And so this was in 1943. And he literally had everything taken from him. His family was taken from him, all hope. He was told day after day that he would never get out of this prisoner of war camp. He had everything stripped away from him. And not only were things taken away, but he was beaten and abused both physically and psychologically. He was abused in so many ways. And he talks about in his book called Alive, his book is called Unbroken. He talks about in his book about how the only thing that allowed him to push through was his creativity. Now, he didn't use those words, but what he did every single day was he imagined that he would run in the Olympics. He was a runner in high school, and he knew that he was going to get to the Olympics. And so every day he would rehearse what it would be like to run in the Olympics, what it would be like to cook a meal with his family and to rebuild his home that had been destroyed from the war. He rehearsed this every single day. He took nothing, everything was stripped from him, and he created something that was incredible, and it gave him the hope to continue to persevere. Our last story is about a soccer team. They were the Wild Boars soccer team, a bunch of 11 and 12-year-olds, and their coach, after practice, went for a hike up in the mountains. This was in Thailand. And they went through and they were hiking this cave. Well, shortly after they entered the cave, it began to rain, and monsoon rains came and ended up flooding the entire cave. They continued to go deeper and deeper into the cave in order to find dry ground, and they ended up 2.5 miles away from the entrance. Well, when boys didn't come home from practice and all these families started recognizing that their boys were not coming home, they sent out a search party, and they knew that they had gone on a hike and they found the cave was full of water. And so they began a rescue party. For 9 days, they searched everywhere they could in that cave to try and find the boys. And the hope of finding them alive became less and less and less. But after 9 days of searching, they found all 13 people who entered into that cave, and they were still alive. They had survived off of the water, the dripping water from the caves, and their coach had previously been a Buddhist monk. And so he taught them meditation. He taught them the power of their mind. And so now that they found them, they had 2.5 miles of how to get these boys out of the cave when the whole thing was underwater. It took expert divers, Navy SEALs, and everything who had been trained in cave diving 5.5 to 6 hours to get to the entrance to where the boys were stuck. So now they were presented with a problem of how do we get these boys out of here? And through the creativity and the imagination of some extremely well trained people, they were able to come in and they actually ended up sedating all of the boys and taking them through. They put full face masks over them, wetsuits, and everything. And then they monitored these boys in this 5.5 hour dive to get them out of the cave. It is this use of imagination to think about problems in a different way. Now, you may never face situations like this where your life is literally in danger, that you are abused in such physical and psychological ways. You may never face imprisonment. You may never face the things that these people have gone through. But what we learned from their example is that when we are faced with the most difficult situations, that it is the power of the mind to be able to think about things differently, to stay focused on what is it that you want to create? What is that desired outcome? Because when we're focused on those things and we think about what can we do to create that, despite having everything shipped from us, to having everything shredded away, what is it that we can do to be able to create the outcome that we want to have? And you can do that through the use of your imagination. The problem that we face now is that we have so much technology that is advancing. We have AI that is learning something new, that is taking over jobs. And it is easy for us to go into the face of fear that everything is being taken away from us. But with the use of your imagination, to be able to think through something critically, hold on to what is it that you want to have? What is that desired outcome that you're working towards? What is it that I need to do to improve, to increase my self confidence? Do you see how all of the laws of success that we have talked about up until this point all play into what is it that you need to do right now? I call this the workshop of the soul. If you can take the things that are happening on the inside of you, increase your self confidence, increase that desired outcome, and then use your imagination to be able to develop what it is that you want to create, to take old ideas and make them new again. What that does is now your imagination is the most valuable thing that you can hold on to. It is your mind that is going to outperform AI every single time. Now, there are going to be people who will tell you AI is not going to take over this place, or, it's not going to affect this industry. It'll affect all of those things, but not this industry. And the reality is, AI is going to touch every single job, every single space, every corner of what it is that you do. But that creativity that you have will always outshine the automations and the artificial intelligence. It is your imagination that is going to become extremely valuable if you know how to use it. If you know what it is that you need to do in order to create that. So, what is it that we need to do in order to create with your imagination? How do we develop that muscle to get us into a place where the imagination really truly does become valuable? And it comes down to two very, very simple principles. First, you have to have the ability to connect with your intuition. If you can connect with ideas that maybe have never come into your mind before, those are going to come down to, are you connected to your higher power? Are you allowing God to work in your life to inspire you to think differently? If you are connected on that plane, then your imagination has the ability to outthink any problem that is faced with. You have the ability to outthink any AI that you are coming up against. If you are connected to your higher power, connected to that inspiration that inside you, then this creation of new ideas from old concepts becomes easier because you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to turn inside. The second principle for activating your imagination is you have to be able to quiet down the things that are happening inside your head. Your brain is going to be telling you things like, you can't do this. You're never going to make it to that place because look at all of the ways that you fail. You have to have the ability to quiet down the stories that are going on in your head. When you can do those two things, connect to your intuition and quiet down the voices that are in your head so that you can actually hear the things that are coming, that's when your imagination becomes absolutely invaluable. That's when we begin this process of creating something that is bigger than anything you've ever thought of. And your desired outcome becomes your reality. It becomes inevitable because you know how to hold on to things and not second guess. Again, going back to the previous laws of success, where we increase that self confidence, we increase your ability to create that desired outcome and then using this imagination to help us get there. If you missed any of the previous laws of success videos, I'll make sure that down in the comments, I have a link to all of those so you can go back and refresh your mind. And maybe it is that confidence piece that you're looking for. Maybe it is something else but if you're in the space, you want to create success in your life, we have to apply the time tested principles of what creates success and how do you achieve it in your life.